everyone, it's Holly. I made this professional development today over effective RTI or response to intervention strategies. These are going to be academic interventions instead of behavioral interventions. This is going to be again for Tier 2 and Tier 3 students. So hopefully by the end of this, the goal is for you to have a set of strategies in your back pocket to use for these types of students. I'm going to start off with a quick analogy of buried treasure here. I found it in one of my resources as I was researching for this presentation, and I really liked it. It says that seeking interventions for students is like seeking buried treasure. It means that we as instructional aides have to be digging for answers. If the first tier doesn't work, you need to dig deeper and create that second tier. And if that doesn't work, there has to be more digging. This can be a long and sometimes arduous process. However, once the right interventions are found and brought into place, students can sparkle like jewels, and they will have brighter futures. So just know that students will be better because of these strategies that we'll be putting into place. I know you've seen this pyramid on the left-hand side of the screen before, but I wanted to specifically go into detail about what students do need at each tier of intervention. So your Tier 1 is going to be your core classroom instruction. This is going to be found in a general education classroom. Tier 2 and 3 are a little different. A quick summary of Tier 2. If students aren't progressing in comparison to peers and expected ability, instruction is going to be supplemented with these academic interventions. Students can move in and out of this tier as needed. They can receive instruction individually or in small groups. So they also are going to receive, again, targeted instruction that looks at specific strengths and needs. These students will be a part of progress monitoring as well. Tier 3, they're going to have some more intensive interventions designed to meet their individual needs here. Tier 3 students also are going to get small group or individual instruction and frequent progress monitoring. Again, students are moved into Tier 3 after not progressing as expected in Tier 2. Again, Tier 3 interventions are typically more individualized. Most of these students in Tier 3 can or will receive special education services, and these are intensive. So again, this is your smallest population of students. Typically, it's between 1 to 5% of the student population receives that Tier 3 intervention. For Tier 2, it's more about 15 to 20% of students in the student population. So I'm going to now kind of go over some academic interventions, some again strategies that you can use in your back pocket. This first one is a literacy strategy. Again, it's for Tier 2 and 3 students. It's going to consist of 4 comprehension strategies. As a whole, it's called the Collaborative Strategic Reading Strategy. The first thing that you can do here, if students are struggling with reading comprehension, is to preview. So it's going to motivate students about what they're going to read. You can often remind them of background knowledge or prior knowledge that they might have. They can make predictions here about the text. You should give students several minutes here to preview text and search for information to help them make predictions. As they do, hopefully students will become familiar with the vocab in the text. And then you can even have a discussion about what different students saw during this preview time and what they might want to learn after previewing the text. The second part of the collaborative strategic reading strategy is click and clunk. So students here will identify parts of text that are difficult. If you meet someone and you click with them, you feel a connection with them. You can explain to students that here they are to identify parts of the text that click for them, whereas a clunk is something that feels like you're running into a brick wall. So their clunks can be either words or phrases that are difficult for them, or maybe even the content as a whole is difficult for them. They should be reading sentences with clunks and looking for clues. So maybe they leave out a word that is clunky for them and they're trying to figure out a synonym or what the clunk represents or means. They can also look to prefixes or suffixes in that word and just ask for help. Getting the gist of it. So students can look for the gist or the main idea in this passage. The goal is to get students to rephrase this in their own words as well. And then the wrap up, students review what they read. They ask and answer questions about the reading that helps them remember what they've read. Another strategy that we can use for literacy instruction for our Tier 2 and 3 students is the strategic model instruction. So these strategies include paraphrasing, learning to express ideas in their own words, self-questioning, developing their own questions about reading passages, and then they can find answers to those questions, and visualizing scenes in the text in detail. Again, this method is going to help students think critically about what they have read, and then it gives them something specific to do while they're reading. These are some academic interventions for math for kids that are, again, in tiers 2 and 3. So there's one called a drill sandwich, which sounds kind of fun. It involves having students practice math using half known items and half unknown items. So those could be maybe concepts that they don't understand or problems that increase in difficulty. It's going to make it easier for students so that they kind of have some confidence moving forward once they can understand and answer correctly the known problems. Incremental rehearsal is another one. These drills and practice begin with easier items so students are more comfortable, again, very similar to drill sandwich, and then they gradually move on to either newer items or more difficult skills. Manipulatives are something that we can definitely still use at the middle school level. This is a great tool for students who are more visual learners. A manipulative is an object that's designed so a learner can perceive a mathematical concept by moving it, manipulating it. These can work with colored paper, colored tiles, fraction tiles. If you look here where it says etc., I have a link, a hyperlink in this presentation for more manipulative examples. You can also get really creative looking online for inspiration or making your own. Now, these academic interventions are for all subject areas, so they can be applicable to many different areas in Tier 2 and 3. So let's go over some of them. The first is setting learning goals. This is going to be really important for students to have some kind of advocacy for themselves. When students set goals for academic achievement, they're more likely to follow them. It forms self-determination, and it fosters strength and follow-through in students. We are going to use specifically for our RTI curriculum SMART goals, and we're going to be making SMART goals with students at different times during their time in RTI with us. The second is to provide choices. So you can do this in a number of ways. You can provide choice in the order of the tasks that they complete in a class period, a choice on the materials they'd like to learn from, whether it's on the computer, paper, pencil, play a game, or you can provide them a menu option. Maybe they have to pick an entree, an appetizer, and a dessert, but they all are going to focus on the same skill. Again, we want to make sure that this is something that the teachers still are in control of in a way, but it's just kind of giving students a little bit of option, a little bit of agency to, do what they would like to do or prefer to do. Again, it increases buy-in. This might not always happen, and there's more choices that you could give students, but again, it's going to be really helpful. Momentum is the third. So momentum is when students begin a task and they want to complete it. So you can do this by giving a series of easy tasks first, so then the student has momentum that builds, and then present a difficult task. They're going to have a sense of accomplishment already, and then they're going to, again, maybe be more apt to try and not succeed at first. Lastly, modifying assignments. I think that's what we're all the most familiar with. You can do this in a variety of ways. You can modify the difficulty of assignments. You can break an assignment into chunks. You can modify the method that a student responds, whether it's verbal, written, maybe they create something. You can modify instructions to an assignment. You can give students set assignment deadlines if that's something that you and the student conversate about and have a conversation about. You can modify the amount of time that you teach or that you lecture. You can modify assignment appeal, maybe giving them a more exciting problem or puzzle to kind of do, maybe do a demonstration, allow them to go online. So there's a lot of ways you can modify content for students. Again, some additional academic interventions for those Tier 2 or 3 students using visual representations. This is especially helpful in math or with vocabulary maybe that a student's unfamiliar with. You can have a student draw a picture, or you can show a picture. You can show any type of chart, a video clip. You can use graphic organizers. Those are really, really helpful, like a flow chart. You can have a student create a mental image. You can have a physical model of something. You can go on a website, do any kind of craft or kinesthetic activity. Those are all going to be really helpful strategies to use. You can also use audio-assisted reading, so maybe have a student listen to an audiobook as they follow along. A lot of older textbooks have CDs. You can find recordings on YouTube, or you can even read aloud to a student. Hands-on learning. Again, whenever the opportunity presents itself, maybe once during a class period, playing a game with a student, having a student cut and paste, doing some type of craft, maybe doing manipulative, or having a student make their own manipulative. Maybe a student's really creative and they'd like to create an artsy type of poster or project. There's lots of different ways that you can incorporate hands-on learning. Lastly is cueing and questioning. You can ask and have students create questions on key points that they need to learn. Asking questions that are higher order thinking questions are going to be really essential to your role as an instructional aid. You want to go beyond rote memorization of what happened in the story. You can ask them to find similarities and differences in characters or between different texts. You can also ask students to make predictions or make inferences as well. We have anchor activities. So these are also great activities to use, kind of have them in your back pocket. When students are working independently, they might finish at different times, or if you're working in a small group, you might have that early finisher. So these are activities that are going to hold your students' interest. You could have them read a book, maybe for class, or maybe they decide to have their own book, or maybe you have a small classroom library. They can journal or write a story. They can update their learning log. They should be doing that every day during class. They can be reviewing the material they just went over. They could be completing other practice assignments, maybe even homework. They can be learning or using different manipulatives. And they could also be completing the NAWIA MapLink assignments and Study Island. So you can give students these options of these different activities that will hopefully capture their interest, and it creates less work for you. Before we end this, I just want you to remember that there's a variety of strategies that I didn't name in this presentation that you can use to help increase student achievement. You can find these on Pinterest, on Teachers Pay Teachers, on any kind of research-based website. Our overall goal, though, is to assess where students are, what skills that they succeeded with, or what skills they're deficient in. Then we want to instruct, we want to differentiate and individualize our instruction to meet those student needs, monitor progress with data-driven information, and then inform classroom teachers and take that data and kind of inform ourselves of where we need to go with the student to help them progress. Lastly, RTI is fluid. So again, we want to assess for these learning gaps, give targeted differentiated instruction to students, monitor student progress, and then the goal, or kind of the ideal situation, is then once we're monitoring progress, continuing to give students that individualized instruction that they need to be the most successful they can be. And then once our students have stable academic progress and they have hit those goals or those milestones, they can then pull away from interventions, maybe go from Tier 2 to Tier 1 and graduate like this girl has from being in an advisory class. I also have my sources here, the 2 books that I mainly used to create this presentation, as well as other resources that are hyperlinked that you can click on and do some more research for yourself. Thank you so much. I appreciate your time. Hope you learned a lot. Bye, everyone.